Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers, welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here. It's Thursday again. Man, it seems like these weeks are just rolling by. I have to tell you guys, last night was the coldest night we've had in South Carolina in a really long time. Guess whose thermostat went out at 11:15 p.m.? That would be mine. It was so cold in this house, y'all. By 4 a.m., the puppy was under the covers, like laying against my leg. I had to put a blanket on the dog. Everybody had heaters in their room, but still, we're all fixed now, but my toes are still not thawed out. All these hours later, man, you don't appreciate stuff like that till you don't have it. That makes me think about people that are homeless. Man, I was laying in bed last night shivering, but thinking I have a roof over my head. I'm in a bed with covers. I have tons of things at my disposal if needed. You start to really think how fortunate you are when little things like that happen. And they're little things because I was able to get it fixed today, but still, it's getting to be cold. And I always sympathize for people that don't have the luxury of a roof over their head. So I'm not complaining. There is still somebody on the stand in this case, but I have to get this episode recorded and then I need to get it edited and out. I'm going to be on Banfield tonight. I should be on at the top of the hour, 10 p.m. Eastern. Hope to see you there. Music fact of the day: 1 in 5 country music songs refer to alcohol. 1 in 3 refer to tears, and 1 in 7 to mama. I love me some 90s country. I've been on a kick lately. Good stuff. I'll update tomorrow. Really, the end of the day has been people that were neighbors of Cash's that had surveillance cameras that were recording the night of the murder. So I will update on maybe the last couple of witnesses tomorrow, but they're basically just going through where are your cameras, how long was it before police got to you, and then they show the footage. So that's kind of what's going on at the end of the day. But starting off this morning, we had Detective Ronaldo Ramirez, who was up for cross-exam. He's asked about how he does things when investigating a crime. The defense asks how quickly he files reports after he's finished investigating that crime scene. He said his approach is that he lets the evidence speak about what happened at the crime scene and not so much on responding officers informing them of what happened. He approaches each case differently, and he said the report was generated for this case in September of last year, but he doesn't know if that was when he actually started writing it or when he submitted it. A little reminder from yesterday: an officer testified that he kicked the bike bag that belonged to Mo to make sure that nothing was inside of it, and then that bag was moved out of the way so first responders and officers didn't trip over it. Detective Ramirez said he would not have kicked that bag. He's asked why he didn't take measurements from the apartment to the location where Mo's bike was found in that thick brush in that little bamboo patch. And he said that information really just wasn't relevant to him. They move on to the Jeep, which is seen on video. Ramirez included that in his report on the case. He said it was suspicious how the Jeep was kind of creeping by, and also the bike rack was noticeable, so that stuck out. He was asked if he was able to identify who was driving that Jeep, and he said no. When his shift ended, he said that really Colin Strickland, who is Kaitlin Armstrong's boyfriend, was really their main person of interest, but they hadn't found any motive for the murder at that time. His conclusions as to why he thought this was targeted and personal was due to the fact that Mo's phone was still on its charger, the locations in which where Mo was shot. It didn't look like there was a home invasion. There was no theft. Just looked like somebody came in, killed her, left, ditched her bike. The next witness was Kaitlin Longoria. She's a crime scene specialist. She begins by explaining what crime scene specialists do. They get updates on what may have occurred. They take photographs of the scene before anything is moved, altered, collected. It's taken as is. She was the one that photographed the crime scene. She took over 400 pictures. My listener said that Kaitlin seemed to be maybe looking at these photos, but really was kind of emotionless, just didn't show any reaction to any of the photos, including the ones of Mo's body. They show a photo of the alleyway. They show a picture that was taken outside of a window pointed in towards that residence. Outdoor photos of her bike, where it was found in the thick and in the bamboo patch. They move inside, and then they show Mo's legs on the floor. Then they show a full body photo of Mo. It shows she was in like a sundress, and that was pulled up just below her belly button. She had blood on her legs, then that wound to her index finger, which had blood coming from it. Makes me wonder if she didn't put her hands up in kind of a self-defense motion. It's just, even though we all know a bullet's not going to be stopped by your hand, it's just our instinct to throw our hand up, which is why you see in stabbings, stab wounds in the hands, the fingers. And then with gunshots, you might see a gunshot wound through the hand just in an effort. In our mind, we think it's going to protect us. I can't imagine the terror that Mo must have felt whenever Kaitlin, or allegedly Kaitlin, entered that apartment and she realized what was going on. They show a close-up of her chest wound and also the exit wound that went through her back. Then a view of the pool of blood underneath her. That was after she had been moved by the medical examiner. There was a candy wrapper by her leg, a bullet that was stuck in a floor where a tile usually is, a fanny pack on the floor, which was very close to her body, and then shell casings, and then a bullet. On cross, she is asked, whoever found the paint that looked like blood, which was outside, we talked about that yesterday, it kind of went up for about a block, and they followed it and realized it was paint and not blood. The defense asked if whoever found that paint was careless in the report since it named the wrong person as the one who analyzed the stain. She said it's possible. She didn't personally analyze this red stain. The defense points out that on the report, it says that both tested negative for the presence of blood. And he asked the witness if the previous witness, Ramirez, either lied or was careless in his note-taking when he said it was determined the stains were not blood, but rather paint. She said, I don't know. Look, I mean, this dude's an investigator. Okay, it's pretty easy. You know, maybe it's dark and you see something red and you think, that's blood. I think it's pretty clear once you shine a light on there pretty good. It's paint, it's thick, it's a different consistency. I mean, blood can coagulate, but I don't know. Unless it's like a dark red blood, I don't know how you would get blood and paint confused. On redirect, they reiterate that her report is not written together with officers who are on scene. It's only hers. She said there were other crime scene techs on scene with her. She hasn't read any of the supplemental reports about the case, just her work, and that was it for her. The next witness is another crime scene specialist by the name of Katie Ferrara. She was responsible for gathering evidence found at the crime scene, including fingerprints, Mo's bicycle, the bullets that were found, swabbed the blood stains from Mo's body, as well as the blood stains that were on the floor. And she kind of goes through when they're lifting prints, they will submit anything that could possibly be a print, but it might not end up being an actual print. She talks about in regards to deciding whether they swab for DNA or fingerprints, it really depends on the surface that they're testing. If the surface is smooth, they'll try to lift a print off of that. If there's a texture on that surface, then they will do a swab for DNA. They show a visual where the crime scene specialist had lifted 22 fingerprints from inside the residence and outside. She also brings out 9mm shell casings that came from the crime scene and examined those. She says that she will change gloves after picking up each individual item that she collects to put into evidence. Then they bring in Mo's bicycle into the courtroom. My listener said this was a very emotional moment because this is probably the first time anybody who knew and loved Mo who's in that courtroom has seen this bike. And in fact, the water bottle was still in place on that bicycle. The bike was enclosed in a very big plastic bag. The reason they do that in general and bag evidence is to preserve either fingerprints or DNA. The witness removes the plastic there in the courtroom and then points out on the bike where she took the DNA swabs for comparison as well as fingerprints. She swabbed for DNA on the seat and under the seat and any surface that had texture. For fingerprints, she went to the frame of the bike, the water bottle. They also show a photo that she took of Mo's friend Cash, the one she was staying with and the one that discovered her body. On the photo of her hands, you can see blood. Now remember, Cash did CPR for up to 10 minutes until first responders arrived. So it's very typical that you're going to find blood on somebody who did CPR. Unlike if you followed the Lori Vallow trial, Alex Cox, Lori's brother who shot and killed Lori's fourth husband, Charles Vallow, pretended like he was doing chest compressions on the 911 call. When they arrived, there was no sweat and no blood on his hands. And then when they did compressions, things started coming out that would have already been out if he had done CPR. There's been several cases where people say they tried CPR and you find out they didn't because it's very obvious to first responders when it was and wasn't done. Also, Cash consented to the witness swabbing her cheek for DNA. On cross, she's asked when Mo's bike was placed in the plastic. She said that due to the size of the bike, they had to put it in the back of the patrol car to take it to the lab, and then they made a bag for it there. When asked, why did you swab certain areas and not others? She said she didn't know how the bike ended up where it was. There weren't any tire tracks. So she was just trying to figure out the most common areas, I guess, that might have been touched. The defense got her to admit that anybody could have put that bike there. The defense also has her position the bike in the courtroom as it was found. She said everybody that was involved in that crime scene agreed on what evidence was pertinent to the investigation and therefore what would be taken in and processed. She doesn't know who took the bike from the crime scene to the police station. She said there's nothing she would do differently at this scene if she could go back. The defense brings up that 2 pieces of evidence were labeled incorrectly. She actually had received an email about that, and while the information on the card was right, she did have to swap those labels. They begin talking about cross-contamination at crime scenes. She kind of pauses here. I'm not sure if she got nervous. My listener said it was kind of awkward and just doesn't answer. After a bit, the defense says they have no further questions. So on redirect, she said she's just not familiar with how DNA is processed. Her job is to take samples to put into evidence for the DNA experts to compare. She says she knows why cross-contamination can be a huge problem at crime scenes, though. The next witness is Timothy Price. He is a detective with the Austin PD. He saw shell casings in the bathroom as well as the kitchen. His team was the one who made the call to swab Mo's bike for prints. Initially, they had no clue who this bike belonged to. He said Mo had blood covering her hair and her face. He thought he may have seen an entry wound in Mo's face, but due to the volume of blood that was on her, he couldn't be sure. This is so sad. He said she was still holding a black hat in her hand and that she was dressed in sandals and then this kind of summer dress. Nobody touched the body other than the medical examiner. He was there when the medical examiner arrived. So when something is found by the medical examiner, they will point that out to law enforcement and also the crime scene specialist. The medical examiner identified the wound to Mo's index finger that was on her right hand. She also had an abrasion or a wound on her leg. Her chin and her ear also had defects. They found a bullet in her hair that was given to the crime scene specialist to put into evidence. Once her body was moved, they located another projectile on the floor, as well as the exit wound that went through her back from that shot to the chest. He spoke to Cash's landlord, whose name is David Harris, that night. Price asked for permission to look in his backyard. Backyard kind of backs right up to the apartment that Cash leases from him. Nothing was found on his property. After the autopsy, the medical examiner gave them some additional information. The gunshot wounds to Mo. She had a gunshot wound to her right cheek with an exit wound on her left cheek. They saw a defect in her dress, her bra, and also her chest. That's when they discovered that chest wound. She had an entry wound around her temple on the right side and an exit wound around the chin area. You think about it, if it's going in the temple, that would have to be a downward shot. So you have to wonder what order these shots came in. No, because it doesn't seem like there's any blood on the couch of the living room. So she maybe had to have been at least lower than Kaitlin when that shot was fired to get a trajectory that goes in here and comes out your chin. They show a video of Cash's residence. They found nothing in the bedroom area or the loft area. The loft is above the bathroom. There are 2 phones seen in photographs on the couch. One of those is plugged in. I believe that one is Mo's. There was another phone and then a laptop. There's luggage on the floor that was opened, and they show Mo's body, a close-up of all the blood on the floor, as well as their shoes. They show photos of shell casings, and then they go outside to show where the bike was found. On cross, her attorney asked about the landlord, and he said he was cooperative, helpful, but really didn't have any information to give them that night. And the defense kind of wonders. She said it's almost like he was thinking out loud. How did he not hear gunshots? He questions why they didn't search the inside of Harris's home. And on redirect, he was asked about that, and he said there was just no reason to go in. Mr. Harris was cooperating. He wasn't evading. He wasn't being deceitful in his answers as far as they could tell. So they didn't have a reason to go in. On recross, the defense asked why they didn't search the landlord's house. And he said after he did his due diligence, he didn't see any reason to go in the house. That was it for his testimony. The next witness was the landlord, David Harris. He first remembers ambulances coming into the neighborhood, and he saw that police were near the residence above his garage, but he didn't go to find out why. He had a son who was in the house as well. His son at the time was in high school. He eventually went to bed, but then he heard a knock on his door. It was two police officers. He cooperated, and after that night, he didn't see police again until that next Saturday. He was out walking his dog and saw plainclothed officers who were speaking with a neighbor of his. So he walked up to him. The officer had body cam on. He said he wanted to tell the officer what he knew. He said after thinking about the night of the murder, he may have information that could be helpful, and it's more than he initially told them. He said he went into his garage to smoke marijuana with his bong before taking a walk. And then he heard someone going really fast down the stairs and maybe a bike kind of driving off quickly. He said maybe whoever was running down the stairs might have heard him and that scared them off. He can't remember what time that happened. Then he said he wasn't completely sure it was a bike, but he thought it sounded like a bike. He said he would have absolutely consented to allowing police to search his residence. The state says, look, hate to have to ask you this. Did you kill Mariah Wilson? He says no. On cross, they asked if he cracked the door of the garage to take a hit off of his bong, and he said yes. He was not high from the hit. There was nothing about that hit that would have hindered his ability to think clearly. In his garage, he said he can hear muffled conversations, but nothing specific. He's not sure if he could have heard the gunshots from his home. He says he didn't, but just in general, he's not sure if he would have regardless. He said if he were in his garage at the time, he definitely would have heard it. You know, and I saw some comments today about this is shady. Why is he just coming back around? Well, look, it's Texas. Marijuana is not legal for recreational use. People get paranoid, even though to police, if somebody's using a personal amount and they're in the middle of a murder investigation, the chances of you getting arrested and hauled off to jail for having a little bit of wacky tobacco, it's not at the top of their priority list. I can guarantee you that. But you do get people who won't call in or tell what they know because they don't want their house searched. You know, they're worried, even though he says he would give consent, and I'm sure he would have. Still, you might be a little paranoid. You know, you might say, yeah, the hit didn't affect me. But if that paranoia sets in, you might not tell everything you know just because you're worried you going to the pokey too, although you're not. The next witness is Martha Paleo, a neighbor who had a ring cam. She had 4 cameras with 2 of those in the back and then 2 out front. The back camera shows that alley where we frequently saw Kaitlin Armstrong's Jeep passing by. Here's a photo of the Jeep. This is one that was released way before trial. Apparently today there was some footage we have not seen yet, one that shows her in front of this woman's house and not in that back alley. Police came to her residence around 6 a.m. and asked if her cameras might have caught anything. So she gave consent. They looked at the footage and then they see this black Jeep. The Jeep was on 18th Street, so that's front of the house, not the alley. That's in the front. This was on her doorbell cam. The footage we have all seen is from the back. So this was a view that people in the courtroom haven't seen yet. The video is stamped at 8:26 p.m., so right within that time frame that we heard about yesterday where she was making this loop. Another camera was pointed towards the alley. It shows the Jeep 1 minute later from when it was in the front. It was in the front at 8:36. It's seen in the alley 1 minute later, 8:37. She was awake when Mo was murdered, but she didn't hear any shots being fired. Around 10 o'clock, she noticed police lights were close to her home. 2 days after, a detective come to watch the footage again. She handed it over to them. On cross, she's asked why she has so many cameras. She said, just to watch out for anything suspicious, to watch my car. I got 8 outside my house, y'all. This is not odd in 2023 to have your entire perimeter covered with cameras. I'm telling you, if you so much as step your pinky toe on my property, I'm going to know. People are crazy, y'all. You got to be protected in your homes. I got 8 cameras, every window, every door. Even if I'm in my house during the day alone, everything is armed and I have a panic button in the main rooms that I'm always in. So good luck coming in my house. Oh, that's not a challenge. But I will say, at night, my gun is within arm's reach, and one of our eyes are going to be adjusted to the dark, and it ain't going to be yours. I never thought I'd say that. I used to be so anti-gun, and then the world got crazy. She said the officer was the one who pointed out the Jeep on the video as a vehicle they were looking into. She had never seen Kaitlin Armstrong in person until today in court. Michael Donnellan was the next witness. He emailed investigators with footage from his cameras after seeing a post on the app next door. You know, if you have a Ring Cam, you can be part of this community where people post crimes that have happened in their neighborhoods. Some people post what they had for dinner. It's become Facebook again, but he actually saw the post where police were asking if people have footage within these time frames to please send that in. His camera's on his porch. The first video isn't time stamped, but he made sure of the time. He said he was able to figure it out. The first video, you see the Jeep kind of creeping by. It's seen again at 8:08 p.m. Is seen again at 8:26 p.m. moving slowly. Here's the eerie part, y'all. This is the camera that caught the scream, and they played that in court today, and my listener said it was haunting. You jump to 9:15, you hear a scream, then you hear 2 gunshots back to back. There's a pause, and then you have the third gunshot. One little piece of news my listener told me is that Kaitlin Armstrong's sister was sworn in yesterday with several other witnesses. They kind of swore them in a group. She's in court today. I don't think they'll get to her today. I think it's maybe 5:30 there in Texas. I'm sure the end of the day is close. Her testimony might be a little more lengthy. Maybe tomorrow. I think it's going to be very interesting because my big question is this: for when Kaitlin went up there to the New York, New Jersey area before flying to Costa Rica, did she know Kaitlin took her passport? I'm interested to hear that, and maybe that'll be tomorrow. But that's kind of it today. It was just a lot of crime scene stuff, and it's really hard to describe photos without being there. We're doing the best we can with what we got, and just thank goodness for my listener who is nonstop shooting me information as the day goes on. So big thank you to her. I hope you guys have a good rest of your evening. We'll see you soon.